Friends, please, if you haven't already, please take your seats. Welcome to JW3, whether you are here in the Howard Hall with us or watching from home across the UK. We know we've got people in America and Israel who have already logged on. My name is Raymond Simonson, and I have the great privilege of being the CEO of this unique organisation, the only Jewish community centre and cultural venue of its kind in the UK. Before I go any further, the housekeeping. Can I kindly ask those of you that are in the room to please turn your mobile devices either off or at the least onto silent, and remember to please avoid any flash photography if you do take any pictures. Tonight's event is sold out, and I can see some empty seats, so it's likely some people will be arriving late. Our team will do their best to get any latecomers into the room to take their seats with minimal disturbance to you, but you can help. If there are any empty seats in your row, it will be helpful for those seats to be as near the aisles as possible rather than in the middle, so they don't step on your toes or trip over your bags. It's a real pleasure for me to welcome our partners for this evening's event, the Jewish News, and the broad coalition of synagogues, Jewish and Zionist youth movements, and other organisations who lead the Choose Democracy campaign. I particularly want to mention the New Israel Fund, many trustees and staff of whom are with us this evening. I know that New Israel Fund have dedicated themselves to defending democracy for a just, safe and equal Israel, and they've played a critical role in putting this evening's event together and driving it with commitment and energy like any great partner, so thank you. As I'm sure most of you know, JW3 has always been committed to being the home for Jewish culture and conversation for the widest range of different people possible, regardless of how they define themselves. We appreciate that across our community, the phrase, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, is perhaps an understatement, especially when it comes to Israel. And at JW3, we of course welcome such plurality of views and opinions. So I'm sure I don't need to remind an audience like this of the great Jewish tradition of civil discourse, of disagreements l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. I said before that JW3 seeks to be a home, and when we welcome our guests into any of our homes for conversation, we expect them to be treated with courtesy, respect and dignity, even when we disagree with them. So I politely remind all of you that's how we will conduct this evening's event, with respect and dignity, even if we disagree with each other or with our guest speaker. Sadly, on a few occasions in recent weeks, we've had to remove people from events at JW3 for aggressive, disruptive behaviour, offensive language, and even threats of violence against our staff or presenters. So forgive me, therefore, for stating what I'm sure that none of you in the room this evening need stating, which is that we have a zero-tolerance policy for racist language, violence or threats of violence in this Jewish home. So, on to this evening's event, a conversation between Tzipi Livni and James Harding on the unprecedented challenges to the future of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. Everyone in this room knows we are living in unprecedented times. In recent months, demonstrations have taken place in Israel and across the globe, including here in London on multiple occasions, to raise concerns about fundamental changes being made to Israel's character by this new government. Those opposing the proposed judicial reforms include such a broad range of people: senior finance people, security, military, high-tech leaders, all of Israel's former attorneys general, people drawn from Jewish, Arab, religious, progressive, orthodox, secular communities, those on the left, the right, the centre. It really is a broad coalition of people. Former Israeli Minister of Justice and Foreign Affairs, Tzipi Livni, has been at the forefront of these protests, encouraging early on the many who risked their lives in the war for Israel's existence to join the fight for its soul. I'm sure you know that Tzipi was only the second woman to hold the post of Israel's foreign minister, the first woman to have held 8 cabinet posts, and the first female leader of the opposition. Since she was first elected to the Knesset in 1999, she has held numerous ministerial and high-ranking political positions, including, just to name a few, Vice Prime Minister, Minister of Justice, Minister of Regional Cooperation, of Immigrant Absorption, Leader of the Opposition, Leader of the Kadima Party, Leader of the Hatnua Party, and many more besides. And after her retirement from politics in 2019, Tzipi became a Fisher Family Fellow at Harvard Kennedy School and a board member of the International Crisis Group and a member of the Aspen Ministers Forum. So who better to come and address us this evening? And we're delighted that Tzipi will be interviewed this evening by a very good friend of JW3, James Harding, the editor and co-founder of the magnificent Tortoise Media. James is the former Director of News and Current Affairs at the BBC. He's a distinguished journalist who was the editor of the Times of London for 5 years, a time during which the newspaper twice won the Newspaper of the Year award. He's written for many magazines and journals, including, for example, The New Republic, The Economist, Slate, The Washington Post, and many others, and appeared on numerous international and national television and radio networks. It's always a pleasure to welcome James back to JW3. So please, without further ado, give James and Tzipi a warm JW3 welcome.
Raymond, thank you so much. That is a really warm and generous welcome to both of us. And Tzipi, I know that you and Naftali actually only arrived this morning, so it's an amazing thing for you to make time for us and help everyone here, I suppose, meet at this time with a level of interest and concern about what's happening in Israel that we probably can't remember. The truth is, I'll come up with some other questions, but I really only have two. One is, what just happened and what's likely to happen next. So,
the first one.
Okay, let's do with the first one. So, should we start there? What happened? This government is what, 12 weeks old? What's happened in the last 12 weeks? How did we get here?
What happened is that we had another round of election, 5 rounds of elections in Israel. Nobody spoke about substance. It was mostly anybody but Netanyahu or only Netanyahu. Focusing on corruption, but not on substance, not about the nature of Israel. And then Netanyahu won the elections and formed a government. And when we watched, well, of course, I didn't vote for Netanyahu, to make it clear. And when we watched this government, the establishment of the government, it was quite shocking. It was quite shocking because it gave a blank check to parties that are far right and also to do ultra-Orthodox. And I mean, you had ultra-Orthodox and far right and settlers within different Israeli governments and coalitions. But always the guidelines were very representing more center-right. And he gave them the possibility to do whatever they want. I mean, Smotrich, who represent the settlers, has now a position within the Ministry of Defense, so he's in charge on the situation in the West Bank. Ben-Gvir, that was really, I don't know, as a young man supporting racist parties and acting against police, and now he's becoming the minister who is in charge on police. So it was quite shocking. And to the ultra-Orthodox also, you said whatever you want. You don't want to serve in the army, you have a minister with legal problems, and no matter what, he will serve in my government. So this was the first shock, but okay, it's democracy, what can we do? Just look at it and be sad. And then we understood that it's more than that, because they start legislating in a manner that was really against all the legal understanding, personal legislation for ministers, for him, and acting or speaking against the general attorney, against the gatekeepers within the government. So we discovered that things are not going to be the same. And then we had this press conference of the Minister of Justice. And he was standing there, saying that now he's going to legislate the following bills. One is that the government is going to nominate judges in the Supreme Court. Secondly, the legal advisors that are gatekeepers, dog watch within the government, well, they can advise, but we don't, as ministers, it doesn't mean that we need to abide. And so we had this, and he's going to put another bill on the table that the Knesset, that the parliament can override Supreme Court decision. And the Supreme Court cannot override or cannot criticize or cannot cancel bills that are against our democratic or constitutional laws. Israel doesn't have constitution, but we have some basic laws. And he put it on the table and said, this is what we are going to do, and this is just first stage, because we have other plans for the future. And this was a moment that I personally felt that, it's something really that is not just implementing your own views or policies, something it's legitimate, it's democracy. I'm against it, but it's part of democracy. But this is against the nature of Israel as a democracy. Because in any democracy, you cannot have unlimited power. You have checks, balances, supervising, and this is the role of the Supreme Court in Israel. And the next morning, and I felt horrified, really, and the next morning I tweeted, I'm coming on Saturday to Abima Square. I don't know who's organizing a demonstration. I don't know who's coming. I'm going to be there. And this was the first demonstration.
And Tzipi, do you think that the Netanyahu government was surprised by the reaction?
Oh, yes.
Or was it a political calculation? Was it, if they wanted to have a political fight, this was the fight they wanted to have?
Oh, we took them completely by surprise, because, Netanyahu watched the opposition in Israel that was divided. One blamed the other. I think that in a way he made the mistake of Putin in the invasion to the Ukraine. No,
Really?
The same miscalculation
Oh,
of
I
the
see.
situation.
Okay. Yeah, it's an odd comparison.
Yes,
Okay.
the opposition is the opposition is divided. I can do whatever I want. I have 4 years ahead. I got the support. I surprised them. I have 64 seats, so I'm even stronger than imagined. And it was real hubris. And I know it from people who work there. They say, well, it was hubris. And then it was not about the opposition. It was not about the leader of the opposition that started to act against him. It was the people.
And can I want to get to those demonstrations. What we saw at the beginning of this week was just extraordinary. But can you explain to us, because it's sometimes hard to understand from here, what the aim is of the government, not just in terms of the Supreme Court, but what they want those powers for? This
is what we discovered. Because at first they tried to say these are judicial reforms, it's about who's going to be a member of the committee who nominates judges. So it sounds like something very legal, something that you should not be interested with. But altogether, since the government was established, it was clear, one, that this is just the first stage. And why is that? Because they have other plans and other ideology. And let's speak about it. The ultra-Orthodox, they don't want to have equality in Israel because they don't want to give equality to women. They don't want to give equality to LGTB. They don't want to serve in the army, and they need to go and explain to the Supreme Court why they think that they deserve exemption from the army. Well, my 2 sons serve in combat unit. How come? And why, when they want to get more money from the government in budget, there are some criteria that they need to adjust to. And therefore, for them, equality is a burden. That the Supreme Court, the role of the Supreme Court in Israel is forcing the government to abide to equality and other civil rights and human rights in Israel. So this is one part of the government. The other part, they represent messianic ideology of greater Israel, no rights to Palestinians. And the Supreme Court, they need to explain to the Supreme Court when they confiscate land of Palestinians, why they're doing it, is it legal or not? and some criticism on illegal outposts in the West Bank. So for them, the grand plan is Greater Israel. The first thing that they need is to weaken Israel's democracy, because if you annex the entire territory, it's clear that when you are a Democrat, you need to give that your choices is or to divide the land into 2 states for 2 peoples, or to give equal rights to everybody between Jordan River and Mediterranean Sea, including the Palestinians. So they are completely against it. So in a way, this coalition represents different interests, but acting against the Supreme Court is the common denominator, and not accepting what's written in the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel, nation state for the Jewish people with equal rights, without any discrimination. For them, it's a problem.
And what do you say?
And on top of this, you have Netanyahu that for his own personal reason, he needs to delegitimize the Supreme Court, the judges, the police, the Attorney General. So,
But just out of interest, the Netanyahu's personal circumstances,
yes,
you don't think are the real driver of this?
only his personal. I mean, I know him, I worked for him. I have hundreds of hours with him. I negotiated peace with him. He agreed also to divide the land based on 67 line. It's all about, I saw the changes. I saw how it changed.
So you're saying it is personal?
Sorry?
You're saying
yes,
it is personal?
It is because of his own personal problems. Something happened since around 2016 to Netanyahu. It's the charges, Trump in power, showing that you can do whatever you want and still get the political support, and you can act against democratic institutions. And when the President of the United States is crossing red lines, when it comes to democracy, these red lines don't exist anymore. So altogether, he discovered that he can use his power and without limitations. By the way, this is why what Biden said yesterday took him by surprise.
Well, I want to come to that. I mean, definitely want to come to Israel's relationship with the UK, the US, the diaspora. And just to let you know, Tzipi and I are going to talk for a bit and then make sure that we've got plenty of time for questions and thoughts, ideally short and succinct ones. But I'll try and be a good citizen and show how that works. As you can see, I'm not that good at it myself. What do you say then, Tzipi, to those people who say, actually, there is a democratic principle at stake. You might not like the political or social attitudes of Orthodox citizens, Orthodox Jewish citizens of Israel. You may not like the agenda of advocates of Greater Israel. You may not like those people who believe that settlements are the right thing. You may not like all of this.
Correct.
But there are elected politicians who are seeking to serve those citizens and advance that agenda. They have been elected, and the Supreme Court is standing as an obstacle, in that sense, to the will of the people. What do you say to those people who say there's a democratic argument on the other side?
I can answer what I said just last Saturday night in Tel Aviv to 300,000 people. In a democracy, there's a place for every group, every individual. In halachic state, there is no place for me. And this is exactly the difference, because when the state, and I'm going back again and again to the Declaration of Independence, that the Haredi, that the ultra-Orthodox signed in 1948 when the State of Israel was established. And it was agreed that Israel is a democracy. So when you are elected, and this is the democratic process, you can promote your own ideology and policy. That's fine, as long as you accept the basic rules of democracy. Rules of law, equality. Democracy is more than elections. Democracy is also a matter of values and rights. And so you need to respect these rights in democracy. So you can, you know, I'm speaking in terms of getting a driving license. You can drive. You want to take Israel. I believe that Israel needs to be taken for one way. You want to take it to another way? Fine. No, it's not fine with me, but I mean, this is democracy. But you cannot decide that you are driving without speed limits, without road signs, without police, without... I mean, this democracy has the right to defend itself. This is what we've learned from history.
And then, what do you conclude then about the old idea of Israel? I don't mean old as in historic, I mean old as in it's been around ever since the creation of the State of Israel, that, if you like, Israel is a train that runs on two tracks. One is democratic and the other is Jewish, and it is a democratic Jewish state. Is it the fact now that actually the pressure of the Jewish state is now fundamentally at odds with the idea of a democratic state, and these two tracks are growing further and further apart?
I believe that this train should and can move forward on these two tracks. But the responsibility of the leadership in Israel is to have these values as a Jewish democratic state living in harmony, not in contradiction. Because what's happening now, you can say that there are two different trains. One is democracy and the other is Jewish, that are driving one against the other. And the question is whether we can prevent this clash. So when you ask Israel, what is Israel? Everybody would say, yes, Israel is a Jewish democratic state. Well, that's nice, but what does it mean? And when you start asking, what does it mean to be a Jewish state? For me, is the nation, it's peoplehood. It's the right of the Jewish people to fulfill our identity in a state of our own. This is why also the United Nations recognizes the state of Israel, because of being a nation. I mean, religion is something that can exist in any democracy. It's not right for a country. Zionism is a national movement, not a religious one. And when the ultra-Orthodox or religious are saying, no, Jewish state means, from a religious perspective, it's a completely different understanding and different meaning of what does it mean to be a Jewish state. And then take democracy. And for many years I thought that democracy is the easiest part, because it's clear what democracy is. And it turned to be in the last few years that for some democracy is just majority rules. And majority can do whatever it wants without minority rights or civil rights. The moment in which maybe an opportunity to have this dialogue within Israel, between Israel and world Jewry, everything is fine as long as this is a sincere dialogue. And therefore, what we saw is that for the first time, after many years, there is more understanding that the gap is not just about how to I don't know, redefine or legislate a bill about the relations between the parliament and the government and the Supreme Court. This was just, you know, something that created everything, that now everything was underneath the surface. And I saw this happening when I was in politics. And I was the party poofer. I mean, she speaks about democracy and these things. No, everything is fine. They will not they will not do what I suggested they would do. And this is happening. And the good news is that, okay, now it's an opportunity.
Let's come to, can everyone hear Tzipi okay? Yeah. Let's come to what happens next in a moment. But just when you talk about... Sorry, we're going to hold you to the prediction. But before we do that, I just wondered whether you can talk a little bit about your personal history in this, right? Because, you know, Raymond introduced you, but you started out in politics in the Likud party. I think your father was a member of the Knesset in the Likud, and I just wonder, what do you think's happened on what we think of as the right? And if you think of the founding of the State of Israel and what's happened in its history, can you explain how we've got here?
Okay, yeah. Yes, Both my parents were freedom fighters. They were in the underground, in the Irgun, fighting against the British Army. Excuse me, were imprisoned by the British Army. My father broke a prison jail. He was the chief operator of the Irgun. My mother was a warrior as well. They met while robbing a British money train in order to get Bonnie and Clyde is. And my mother escaped from prison when she asked somebody to inject her milk, and they took her to her hospital, and she jumped from the second floor when they wanted to operate her and escaped. So instead of, grew up, instead of sharing me stories and fairy tales about Red Hood, these were the stories that I grew up upon. What we call in Israel a member of the fighting family. By the way, both of them, they got married. They are the first couple that got married in the independent state of Israel. The day after the Declaration of Independence was signed, and they believed in Greater Israel. By the way, both sides of Jordan River. Because this was historic Israel, the biblical judicial rights of the Jewish people. But they all also believed in equality. Their mentor was Jabotinsky and later Menachem Begin. So the choice was not between the land of Israel or equality. It lived together. And they believed in equal rights to minorities, to Israeli Arabs, and so on. And the day after the State of Israel was established, after Menachem Begin maybe left my parents' wedding because he participated in this wedding. By the way, you know how do I know that they were the first one and not the third, for example? This is a Jewish community. You cannot get married between Passover and Shavuot. It's Firat HaOmer. You can't. But my grandmother forced the Rabbi of Tel Aviv to say that. So he agreed to do so as long as just few people will attend, and Begin was one of them. Anyway, the day after the Declaration of Independence, Menachem Begin gave a speech, and I quoted this speech in these demonstrations because he was speaking about equality. He was speaking about freedom of citizens, about respecting rights, about what we call the superiority of the judges over politicians. He was speaking, I don't know, I hope that I can translate it. He said that in our country, in our newborn country, justice will rule over its rulers. So this is something, this was the ideology. It was both, yes, the land, but also rights. And in a way, I needed to choose because if we want to keep the entire land, and since we know that there are millions of Palestinians living there, from my perspective, and not only mine, those really what we call those who grew up in Beitar and believe in Jabotinsky and Menachem Begin. Menachem Begin, after 1967, wanted to give identity cards to the Palestinians because he believed in equality. And now we are having groups speaking about Greater Israel. They speak about the land, but they don't accept democracy as such. So since we mentioned before trains, I'll use what I call the Waze example, because my national Waze, my destination is a secured Jewish democratic state in the land of Israel, okay? In order to do so, in order to...
Hold on 1 second.
Hello? Okay. In order to have Israel as a Jewish democratic state without a contradiction between the Jewishness and democracy, majority.
I'm just going to make sure. Can you hear me, or do you just hear? That's the wrong way around. Let's see. Yeah, that's not what you want.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, let's give it.
Okay.
Ah.
Okay,
Tzipi.
it's better now.
No, let's just put the mic over on this side, so we're talking to me, Katsu, that way. Yeah. There we go.
It's more complicated than you think.
Yeah, that's it.
No.
Oh, no, it's upside down. Oh, no, that's it.
Is it okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, going back to the ways, okay? My national ways, Jewish democratic state in the land of Israel. We need to have a Jewish majority because otherwise we are going to have a clash, because without a Jewish majority and a democracy, you cannot have a Jewish state, unless it's apartheid state. And Israel, I don't want Israel even to reach this moment. Okay, so when I'm driving in these ways, I want to stop in a station, hopefully what I call the peace station. Hopefully I can find a partner there. I negotiated twice. Unfortunately, also the Palestinians made their own mistakes and didn't agree to some really just solutions that were on the table. But yet, I'm not changing my destination. So taking this example, some traffic jams. So we can wait for a while, finding new roads, but we are not changing our vision, our destination. There's a group in Israel that their national ways is Greater Israel. And when I'm driving, I want to separate us from the Palestinians. Hopefully in peace, two states for two peoples. They want to separate Israel from democracy. And this is where they are taking us. And the bad news is that we were all sitting in the last 5 rounds of elections in the same car, and we were all focused whether Netanyahu is the driver or not. But we were taken, in a way, to this destination without noticing. Because the bon-ton in Israel was to be right-winger, and because Netanyahu spoke about left-wing or certain left, or those who try to achieve peace as cooperating with the enemy, traitors, and so on. And unfortunately, some of the center-left leaders spoke in a rightish manner, tried to portray themselves as more right-winger. And what now was discovered that, hey, where they are taking us. This group of extremists, it's not just about, it's also about our democracy. And on top of this, unfortunately, we saw the horrors of Hawara, of this Palestinian village, what was done there, and it's not us. It's not what we believe in, it's not who we are. So the good news is that now people are fighting for something, not just against something.
So tell us about that.
And this something is democracy.
So, well, it's democracy, and I hope at some point we'll get to your point about the destination of peace. But tell us, answer if you will now, your best guess, Tzipi, at what happens next.
Okay. I don't know what will happen next, and I'm optimistic. And this is not my usual state of mind, so. Okay, in a way there's a cessation, and there's a dialogue which is happening at the president's, is hosting this dialogue between the coalition and different parts of the opposition. While the demonstrators are continuing to demonstrate. They are not stopping, and rightly so, because you need to understand the political leaders were not those that they joined the demonstration. They didn't lead this. So they are negotiating. Now there's a question. If they will negotiate the situation like it is all just about judicial reforms, we are in a problem. Well, because Netanyahu and this coalition learned that they exaggerate. I think that they will try to be more reasonable, maybe, not just about this specific bill, but maybe instead of putting everything on the table and that create this wake-up call, maybe they will do it in a different manner. and they will try to weaken or hopefully they hope that we are entering holidays now, that the demonstrations will be less dramatic. Now, if they won't find any solution, and if the coalition will say, we are those who want to nominate judges, they will not reach an agreement. Okay, this is one option. They will not reach an agreement. We are having this clash over substance, over values, which is a good thing.
And does...
And
So go on.
yes, and I think that the real dialogue should be about what we discussed now. I would start this dialogue by asking the coalition, let's take the Declaration of Independence. Do you agree at first to the basic that Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people with equal rights to all its citizens? If you agree, that's fine. So let's legislate this bill as a basic law, as the first article of our future constitution.
Can you just explain that for us? Because I don't understand the politics of that, Tzipi. People will have seen you've made this case for the basic law, but are you not just going to create a long-running argument about the nature of the state of Israel that divides Israel and Israelis by doing that? How do you bring people together in that process?
I believe that just two groups it's difficult for two groups in Israel to accept it. I believe that this was and should be the common denominator. And these two groups are the ultra-Orthodox and maybe the settlers, some of them. I mean the ideological groups, and some of the Arabs, because the representative, the party that shared, the Arab party, the Muslim party that participated in the last government, they accept these. They say, yeah, this, from a national perspective, that's fine with us as long as we have equal rights. I believe that most of Likud voters, for them it's the obvious.
Yeah.
They don't even understand where we were taken. I discovered it a few years ago when they legislated the nation bill. The nation bill was the obvious, stating that Israel is the nation state for the Jewish people. But then I discovered they wanted me to legislate this bill. When I was the leader of the opposition, I said, that's great, okay, let's legislate that Israel is the nation state for the Jewish people. And I said, okay, give me this bill. They drafted an NGO that is acting outside of the parliament. I said, okay, if you want to draft it, that's fine, I'll read it. Now, every basic law in Israel starts with the words that this basic law is being legislated in order to implement the values of Israel as a Jewish democratic state as written in the Declaration of Independence. This was the obvious. This was the common denominator until a few years ago. And I said, okay, where is this sentence? And they said, no. And say, okay, where is democracy? Where is equality? And they say, and then I discovered that something that was the obvious is not obvious anymore. So I discovered it, but the public, for them, well, of course, we are legislating the nation bill. And just in the last 4 or 5 years, apparently, there are groups that are against equality. They are not the majority now.
So let's assume that's one possible route, that actually those people that we've seen on the streets organise and pursue an agenda around a basic law. It's one possibility. Not being a politician, but being a political analyst for a moment, who is more likely to force Bibi Netanyahu from government? The left or the members of his own coalition?
Opposition never break governments. Governments are being broken from the inside. I mean, the opposition, so just count the numbers. So I mean, they don't have the majority.
No, I guess that, and my point really is, how weak is Bibi Netanyahu in this?
Well, weaker than he expected to be after the elections, that's for sure. And I think that he believed that he can ride on the leopard's back, that he will control everything. He gave interviews in English saying, yes, I will control. He thought that he's the responsible adult. He can sign whatever they want. He's not going to implement anything. He's used to sign contracts without fulfilling it later. No, I mean, this is what I thought, according to my understanding. Okay, I don't know that, but this is what it looked like. And then they discovered that they are truly serious. And they demand, so he, in a way, tries to maneuver this situation. And he discovered that while he gave speeches all over the world saying, I will control it, he can't. And I think that most probably the government will collapse if we reach a moment in which he will discover that he cannot give them everything that they want. Why? Because of international matters, because of the United States,
So do you
because
think,
of economy.
so when you say the government most likely collapses, this year?
I don't know.
Okay.
No, I mean, I wish I knew, but...
No, all right. Let's just touch then on this subject you talked about just now, the United States, and actually the Jewish diaspora and the relationship with the State of Israel.
Okay.
There are some people who say, look, this really is an issue about how Israel governs itself. It's a matter of sovereignty and domestic politics. Even if you're Jewish and you live around the world and you care deeply about the State of Israel, this is not your fight, right? What do you say to Jews living around the world, Jews living here in the UK, about their role, responsibility, if any, in this whole process?
You know, I am worried about it because when I'm looking at the situation, and not just in the last government, but in the last few years, it looks like the grandparents cried with joy when the State of Israel was established. Their children were horrified in Yom Kippur War. And their grandchildren sometimes feel alienated to the State of Israel because their parents and grandparents cried with the notion that we are the Davids of the region, of the world. We used to look at ourselves from a bird-eye point of view, small country surrounded by enemies, strong. And then they are looking at Israel from a Google Earth point of view. And what they see is the strong Israeli army, and Israel has a very strong army, and the poor Palestinian, and you tend to feel empathy to the weak. And they need to give explanations in the campus when they're speaking about young people, and sometimes they don't give an answer. And my heart was broken when I came to Boston and I met Hillel students. And one of them told me, you know, I am liberal. I'm a liberal Jew, and my friends are liberal. And they told me that if I support Israel, the meaning is that I'm not liberal, and I cannot be part of this group. And I believe that there's a need to have a new dialogue between Israel and the world Jewry. The old dialogue was, okay, we are there for you in case of anti-Semitism, we are the safe shelter. You should open your pocket, support us no matter what, and we will make our decisions. This was the old dialogue. I think that we should change it. When I'm speaking about Israel as a Jewish state, it doesn't mean only for Israelis or for Jews who live in Israel. What does it mean to you? Since we are having this dialogue also inside Israel, hopefully we are having this dialogue now, not just demonstrations, let's have this dialogue also. And when there's a better understanding, then we can have a better understanding that this is really one family. Now we need to have this common denominator, and on top of this, I mean, those who criticize any Israeli government policy are not anti-Israeli or anti-Semitic. I mean, I criticize my own government as an Israeli, so it doesn't mean that I'm anti-Israeli or anti-Semitic. As long as, and this is my condition, that we all agree that Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish democratic state, and Israel has the right to defend itself. Mm-hmm. When these are the basic, So on top of this, we can have different views about any decision of any Israeli government policy. And I know that some are looking at the situation now in Israel, and as we feel that we are, fighting for something. And we saw these demonstrations in London, and it was amazing. It was really amazing. We felt, we in Israel, that we are not alone, that we are part of something that is bigger than us and bigger even than the state of Israel. And this is about being part of the Jewish people.
So let me ask you one final question before I open up to kind of questions and views. One final thing is to go back to your Ways example, the journey on the road to peace. Do you think that what we've seen in these last 12 weeks, and particularly in this last week, means that Israel's journey to a peaceful settlement with the Palestinians is nearer or further away?
It's better than the situation that was before the elections, because frankly, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was not on the table for 5 rounds of elections. Nobody wanted to speak about it. As I shared with you, I felt that we are being taken to one state, not solution, to one state reality, without decision. Now, the demonstrations are about democracy. They are not about peace between us and the Palestinians, but I think that, I hope, that more and more Israelis would understand that everything is connected. If you are for democracy, so you would not agree to live in a state that turns into one state solution without equal rights. And therefore, we need to give an answer to the conflict now. Now, most of the Israelis would say, and rightly so, there is no partner on the other side. And as I told you, I negotiated. Abu Mazen, unfortunately, didn't give a yes answer. But there is something else that I tried to convince Israelis. It's not about them, it's about us. It's not the Palestinian problem, it's an Israeli problem. And speaking about the days when the State of Israel was established, the Israeli or the Jewish leaders accepted the petition resolution of the United Nations. For my parents, it was quite difficult. They were quite happy that the United Nations accepted and supported the Jewish state, but yet it was about dividing the land.
Yeah.
But this was the choice between a Jewish state or the entire land. And the Arabs said no, frankly, and they started the war against Israel. But we decided we will keep our Jewish state, not on the entire land, even if the Arabs didn't accept it. And we are in the same situation. So the Palestinians maybe are not waiting for us in the station for one reason or the other. But the real question is what we are putting in our national ways. And then we'll find a way, hopefully, to reach peace, to solve this problem. But first and foremost, it's about us.
Tzipi, thank you. Is it possible just to bring up the lights? Because I think there are a couple of people with mics. If you're happy to, will you just say your name and you introduce yourself to Tzipi when you ask a question? Or I appreciate some people will want to make a point. If you do, keep it succinct, please. But there's a gentleman here, I think, who's got his hand up. Thank you so much. And there's a lady over here. I'm going to come to you in a moment, man.
Working? 1, 2.
Got you, yeah.
My name is Chen. I'm an Israeli living in London. I'm participating in those demonstrations in London. My brothers are participating in those demonstrations in Israel.
I cannot hear. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Do you
Could you see if we can just put the mic up?
Okay.
Yeah, we got you.
My name is Chen. I'm an Israeli living in London. And I'm saying I participate in the demonstrations here. My brothers in Israel participate in demonstrations there. I have a brother in California that is protesting there. My question is, say we win this round, what's the end game? I mean, we're looking, the ultra-Orthodox are going to be a third of the population by 2050. What happens then?
Chen, thank you.
Okay. Yes, it looks like what we call demography will make the decision for us. But what I'm saying today is that we still have the majority in Israel, including Likud members, that if we open this dialogue, they would support, politically they will support Likud, they support Netanyahu, everything is right. But this political partnership with the ultra-Orthodox doesn't mean that it represents their own views about the nature of Israel. So maybe there's an opportunity to go back to base and to accept that this is what connects us. Until now, usually you see Israelis united when we are, unfortunately, under terror attacks, on wars and so on. So maybe it's an opportunity to be united for something. Mm-hmm. And accepting, and also having the ultra-Orthodox accepting this situation, because otherwise it will change entirely what Israel is. And I believe that it's very important to find a way to form this as common denominator and have the ultra-Orthodox adjusting to it, and they can have their own rights. I'm not against this. This is the meaning of democracy. They are part of Israel. They have their own rights, but not taking the Jewishness of the state of Israel on top or cover the democratic nature of Israel.
Tzipi, thank you. Cindy here with a green jumper, and then so I'm going to come to you in a moment, and then there's a gentleman here in the middle. Yes.
Hello, Jacqueline Gross. Hamas, Hezbollah and Iran must be absolutely rubbing their hands with glee watching Israel destroying itself, in inverted commas, from within. Can Mr. Netanyahu still be called Mr. Security?
Thank you. So the question was that the Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran stand to gain from this. Is Netanyahu still Mr. Security?
Netanyahu was never Mr. Security. I mean, I was a member of the Israeli cabinet, and it's time for women to be in power, including on security decisions. I mean, yes, he has the look and he has the tone, but I was with him in Israeli security cabinets during wars and military operations, so let's put it on the table. Secondly, yes, I know that what's happening in Israel, some of our enemies are, sitting and saying, okay, they will collapse. But I believe that this is part of showing that Israel is a strong democracy. And I prefer this, and hopefully time will not come, but when we are under threat, trust me, we know how to be united. So I think that it's more important now to do it instead of saying, okay, sometimes unity is the replacement of, okay, let's be united, so you shut down, don't speak up, people are listening, the outside world is listening. Why you're giving interviews to Channel 4 here or BBC or CNN? No, because we are strong enough, and this is more important for us, and we are going to speak up, that's it.
Tzipi, there will be some people here who, as you could hear, agree that women should be in power in Israel, and I reckon
Not
some
only
of them...
in Israel, by the way.
I know,
We are turning Me Too as victims into Me Too in power.
I was just going to ask, though,
Without you noticing.
Some people will, in this room, think of a woman that might be quite good at that.
Okay,
and they would ask, what do you want to do about that?
I was in power for 20 years.
I know, but...
I quit politics when I felt that my last campaign, by the way, was for peace and for democracy. And I felt that I was alone. I didn't get enough political support to do it. And I quit politics. And I lived quite happy life without politics. And when I saw what's happening, I said, okay, I cannot just live my life without it's time to fight. So I'm part of the demonstration. I'm speaking up in demonstrations, and so I'm in public life, not in political life.
But do you think, sorry,
This
just to press
was the
it,
answer.
no, it's nearly an answer. But do you think if there is at the next election, do you think you'll run?
I'm not planning it. I'm not making a campaign. I made my decision to join politics on one Yom Kippur in 1995. I decided to quit politics when I felt that this is the right thing. Maybe this is also, I'm not sure, but maybe also this is the difference between men and women. I didn't plan when I joined politics to run for office as a prime minister, and I quit when I felt that this is the right thing. And for now, the right thing for me is to speak up in rallies in Tel Aviv and to share my vision. And I'm not in the parliament and as part of a political party.
Good. So there's a gentleman here in the middle there who's been waving at me, and I saw who was there.
Good evening. My name is Morris. I would like to say a small something which I had an experience with the Honorable Lady Tzipi many years ago. I went into the Knesset and had a half an hour meeting with, supposed to be with Tzipi. And I asked one question. After 1 minute, she told the assistant, "Totzi oto mipo." So let him get out, not knowing that I understand Hebrew. But that's not my question now. My question is, in the previous election, when Bennett and co, they signed a document on television, and they promised the people that they will not go into coalition with the Arabs and with Meretz. And they made the coalition with Arabs and Meretz. They stole the votes of the people then, and they made a coalition. Tzipi did not go into the streets then because they have stolen the votes of the people. Why did she not demonstrate?
Morris, thank you.
Because, no, as I said before, in Israel, different coalitions are being formed with different policies. Some, not to say most of politicians, are breaking what they said before the election and later. By the way, Netanyahu before the election was not willing to be on one stage with Ben-Gvir, which is now the Minister of National Security. But it's not about that. This is part of, unfortunately, this is part of policy, of politics. I hate it, but this is part of politics. But what they are doing now is not part of politics. You cannot be elected and the next day to say, let's shorten everything, okay? Let's assume that they were elected. And Netanyahu, instead of putting different bills and saying that Israel is democracy, let's say that they say, okay, Israel is not democracy anymore. Should we accept it? So they are not saying it, but this is what they are doing. So it's not just another political debate. It's not about breaking something that you said before the elections and doing something completely different later. This is happening. It's politics. I hate it, but it's happening. But now it's completely different. They decided to rule without any limitations, and this is not democracy. It's not politics, it's not democracy.
Tzipi, thank you. Morris, thank you very much. I'm just going to take Tzipi, if it's okay, I'm going to take 2 or 3 questions at a time.
Okay,
just so
let's take it together.
Yeah. So I'm going to take this. There's a gentleman here. And then I'm going to come here. I can see you at the back, sir, and I can see you too, sir. Yes.
Thank you, James. My name is Paul Berger. One of the several elephants in the room is the 20% Arab population. And my question is, what will it take for there to begin to be a dialogue that doesn't say that the Arab parties are outside what we call the consensus in Israel, but are an important part of the population and need to be part of the consensus?
Okay, one question.
Paul, thank you. There's a gentleman down here. If you've got a mic, there's a gentleman here in white, and then there's a gentleman also in white there. I'm going to come to you in a second.
Hi, good.
Yes.
Sorry, good evening. My name is Boaz. My ways journey brought me here 21 years ago, so I'm half Israeli, half British, very Jewish. So a comment and a question. The comment is that one group that was going to be excluded from this whole game is the people in this room and all the community they represent. If you just take the numbers that I think the Jewish News published last week, 83% of the Board of Deputies are going to, or thinking about publishing a letter about their concern about the situation in Israel. Not the whole Board of Deputies, just 83%. So that's 83%,
83%
probably.
deputies.
So 83% of the British jury is going to be excluded from the planned Israel, or the Israel that Netanyahu and his friends are planning. So just let's take that into consideration when we say, and we ask questions like, should the people in this room, should the people living outside of Israel will be involved in the conversation? That's a massive group that is going to be excluded from the game. A massive group that sees Israel as its second home, first home, no matter how you put it. So that's one thing to say. And the other thing to ask Tzipi, as a former senior security forces operative, I know you sort of didn't include that in your little biography, if the day will come that services, security service, not just the secret ones, needs to make a decision between government and law, what do you think they'll do?
Thank you, Boaz. We'll come to that in a moment. And would you mind, there's the gentleman just up here in the middle who's had his hand up with the glasses. Yeah.
The question is what do you think the implications are for the recent negotiations between Saudi and Iran?
Yeah.
No.
Saudi and Iran.
Iran, yeah.
Yes, okay.
This was the question that I heard.
Yeah, right. I'm sorry, I didn't hear your name.
My name's Greg Rand.
Greg, thank you. All right, so the Arab population,
No, I heard.
you got all of that. The security choice, Saudi and Iran.
Okay, I'll start with this one. I hope that we will not reach this moment, but between government and law. Law, I think that they need to choose law, and I hope that we will not reach this point. And I think that for the first time, this question was in the air, and I think that it also shocked everybody, including the government. So I hope that they will not bring us to this moment. Secondly, about the Israeli Arabs. It was mentioned before about the former coalition that an Arab party was part of it. Instead of speaking about Arabs or Jews, let's speak about guidelines of government. When I said before that the ultra-Orthodox or some of the Arabs would not accept Israel as a Jewish democratic state, but there are some, including Mansour Abbas, who participated, and he is a great leader. And I told him so as well. And he participates in the dialogue now on behalf of his party. So I believe that as more and more Arabs will understand that when we are speaking about Israel as a Jewish state, it doesn't mean that we deprive them from their rights, but the meaning of Jewish democratic is that they are equal rights citizens. It will be easier for them also to be part of coalition and feel connected to Israel, because some unfortunately feel alienated too. It also, my expectations also from other Jewish leaders to accept it and not to be frightened when right wing is blaming you that if you are sitting with Arabs, the meaning is that you are cooperating with the enemy. Because in elections of 2015, when Netanyahu said that the Arabs are driving to the polls with buses organized by left wing and financed by the EU, it was not against the Arabs. It was against left wing, because what he's doing is connecting everything. Since now I'm speaking about perceptions and images. The perception is that the Israeli Arabs are connected to the Palestinians, and you have Palestinian terror against Israelis. So they are also the enemies, the inside enemy. And when you are cooperating politically with them, they portrayed the last government, the Jews that were part of this government, as enemies, as cooperating with terror. And this should be stopped. And I think that just the good thing that happened is that this group that is demonstrating, we truly don't care how they call us. And this was part of my first speech. I said it. You can call us traitors, you can call us no matter what. This is what we are doing. And in the last demonstration, some of the Arabs came with Palestinian flags. So they tried to portray us as Palestinians supporting the Palestinians. And the next demonstration, we regained the Israeli flag with these values. And this is very important. As for Saudi and Iran, yes, it's part of our concern, but yet it's not the first time. I mean, Saudi and Iran had diplomatic relations before. The reasons that they did it is not connected to their non-relations with Israel. But it's not only Saudis, you have also UAE. The situation in the region is changing toward Iran. And yes, it's the Israeli idea, and we thought that also normalization with our countries can be not only having relations, better relations and normalization with them, but also as part of a security alliance against Iran. It may be changing these days, this part.
Thank you. There's a gentleman here. Oh, you've got the mic here. So there's one person with the mic here, and I'll come to you, sir, and I'll come to you, madam, in the front. Yes.
Hi, my name is Eli. Eli, you mentioned already that the leader of the oppositions were not the leaders of the demonstrations. Now they are sitting there negotiating who they represent.
Yeah.
And say the demonstrations movement is successful and we have a new election. Do you think there's any party today that understands all the things you talked about?
Good question. There's a gentleman up there you were asking, and I was also going to come to this woman here in the front. I'll come to you in a moment, sir.
Thank you, James. Thank you. It's David Zoll. Tzipi, if there is a perception that the checks and balances are out of kilter in Israel because the Supreme Court is too weak, is there any scope for a consensus to have a real reform, which would be to bring in a constitution, expand the basic laws into a much bigger constitution, a constitutional court, like in certain other countries, and a second chamber?
Okay.
Thank you. And there's a right down here at the front, if you would. I'm just going to bring you a mic, one moment. Just here in the front row. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ronit. I just wanted to know whether you thought there was any value in a new political party, run potentially by some women, called Choose Democracy. Could there be another new political party on the horizon?
Thank you. All right, let's do issues. I'll come to you. We've got time for a few more questions. I'll come to you in a moment. Let's go with Ellie's question first, which is the opposition demonstration and who will the opposition represent next?
Well, frankly, it depends on what will be during this dialogue with the president. I agree that it took some time to the opposition leader to understand what's going on, but they joined. They understand better now. They need the support of the demonstrators in future elections. So, I mean, if they find a formula that gives an answer, a real answer, not just something that is redrafting one bill is not good enough. So we'll see. I mean, it depends on the outcome. But they were not, while they entered the negotiations room, the demonstration already announced that they are going to continue the demonstration because they don't want this dialogue to be abused to reduce this their voice. I think that we'll know that in the next few weeks.
And Tzipi, basic law, constitutional court, second chamber?
We don't have a constitution. I participated in the past when I just joined the parliament in trying to reach a constitution with different parts of politics and NGOs and so on. It's quite embarrassing to say, but I represented at the time the young generation. It was 20 years ago, and we didn't reach a constitution. And therefore, I think that there are those now calling for constitution. This is really something that maybe it's more than we can achieve. And this is why I said that the dialogue should be, do you agree to this sentence from the Declaration of Independence, so it was already written, and next step is to ask, after we agree on this, then we can speak about the relations between the different authorities and whether we agree also. This is the next question, whether we agree that the judicial institutions are independent. If we agree on this, we can agree on everything else. I'm not sure that we can agree on this basis anymore. What was the term?
New political party.
About?
Is there a moment, choose democracy, is there a moment for a new political party?
No, I don't think so. No, I mean, if it was another way to ask me his question, or so,
better. I'm going to come in, this is going to be a last lightning round of questions.
The problem is not about more parties, it's about having real substance within the existing parties and maybe even unifying different parties today.
There's a lady here in the blue, and then a gentleman in the middle I said I'd go to, and then you, sir, at the end. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Diane. I'm English. All my family live in Israel, but I couldn't learn the language. I just wanted to let you know that I told my first cousin Esty that I was coming to hear you speak, and she said, wonderful. She said, that's who I want to become president.
Thank you.
And in fact, the thing is, I then told another of my cousins living there, and he said, yes, yes, yes. So there you go, you've got 2 votes.
2 support. Thank you very much. Diane, would you just pass across because there's a gentleman there in the middle?
Thank you, Diane. I'm Fred Becker. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed your questions and speech. What role has the technology industry in Israel played in this discussion? And what more could they be doing given their influence, power, money, et cetera?
Good. Fred, thank you. And then this gentleman here. There's a... Oh, there he goes. The plane. Pass the witness. There's just a young gentleman here. Thank you.
You've spoken about Palestinians in living in Israel and in other countries, but what about Palestinians in the West Bank? When the government hate them and the opposition ignore them, forget 2 states, is there any route to a remotely better life for them and end to military occupation?
Tzipi, so Fred's question was technology, and so I didn't know your name.
Please re-ask the questions, because it's
you
difficult for me to hear with the echo.
My name is Jonah. So Fred Becker's question was, what's the role of technology in these latest demonstrations, and what greater role could technology have? And Jonah's question...
So I need to understand better. What does it mean, technology?
High tech or tech? Are we quibbling over which those things are? Yeah.
You're speaking about technology or the high-tech...
High-tech companies.
Okay.
I didn't reckon that was going to be
and
yeah. There we go. Yeah.
And the other question?
I think the other question is, what about Palestinians living in the West Bank when they are facing a military occupation, they're abandoned by the opposition without any prospect for peace? What's the prospect for them? Fair?
Yes, okay. Yes, the high-tech sector in Israel joined the demonstration. And I think that this was one of the leverages on Netanyahu, and he understood that it's not just political issue, but it's affecting really Israel's economy and so on. And they led some of the demonstrations. By the way, speaking about Israel as high-tech or as startup nation, you should see different parts of how innovation you have in these demonstrations. It's really, you can see in different parts, or women in red, and so you can see different ideas. And when I'm watching the demonstration, I say, okay, Israel is really a startup nation. But truly, it was very influential on I think, the government decision making when they understand that it affects this sector is part of it, and it's a very important sector to Israel's economy. About the Palestinian, yes, as I said before, it's not maybe, we don't have enough time to share, but I negotiated twice with the Palestinians. I believe that the idea of two states for two peoples represent the interest of Israel and represent the interest of the Palestinians as well. I mean, we have a national conflict between two national movements. One is established already a state, the Zionism that established Israel. The Palestinians did not. And I believe that as long as this is a national conflict and not a religious conflict, it can be solved. But this conflict can turn into a religious conflict like this. And now what we are having on the Palestinian side, we have both, because we have in Gaza Strip is being controlled by Hamas. Hamas is a religious Muslim, Islamist ideology that is not willing to accept the right of Israel to exist. Unlike the national movement that is willing to do so, but yet we negotiated in the last round of negotiations in 2014, the Americans put on the table a paper representing framework for negotiation based on 67 lines. By the way, Netanyahu agreed to this. Netanyahu, he said, well, it's not. He knew and drafted every sentence, every letter in every word in this paper, but he said, okay, it's not my paper, it's going to be an American paper, but I'm willing to negotiate on the basis on this with reservation, which was really good enough. And on March 2014, Abu Mazen was invited to the White House. Obama presented this paper, and Abu Mazen didn't give an answer. He didn't say no, but he didn't say yes. Twice. This has already happened in 2008. So I'm not going to enter a blame game because it's not important. It is our responsibility and our need to find a way to reach an agreement. But, and some in Israel, on both sides, you have those supporting the idea of two states, and you have those that are completely against it, on both sides. And the real question, how we can find a majority here and there to find a way to reach an agreement. But I agree, and as I said before, when Hamas was elected in 2006, the entire international community reached what is called the quartet requirements. Saying you can get legitimacy the next day, we can open Gaza as long as you accept the right of Israel to exist, renounce violence and terrorism, and abide to Oslo Agreement. And they are not willing to say that. So the real question is how one, and I'm speaking about Israel, how can I or others, since I'm not in politics now, explain or convince Israelis that it is our interest. It's not that I wake up in the morning thinking about the Palestinians, but I'm worried about what will happen to Israel without an agreement with the Palestinians. And since we are human beings and it's part of our interest as values to give Palestinians better lives. But unfortunately, sometimes we need to act against terror. But what I represent part of Israeli society, and there is another part that is not willing to do so, speaking openly and frankly.
Tzipi, thank you. I know there are lots of people who've got other questions. We're going to continue one of the great JW3 traditions, which is wishing we could talk for longer. I just wanted to say two things. I know that Raymond's going to come and say thank you to you. For all of us trying to understand what's happening there, listening to you is a really important and valuable thing at any time, but mostly now. I didn't expect to go home this evening with the words of Menachem Begin, justice will rule over its rulers, ringing in my ears. But that is a statement not just for Israel, but for all of us. I think there is a lot to be learned for us in that. And rather than thanking you, because I know that Raymond is going to do that, I just also wanted to say thank you to JW3 and to Jewish News, enabling us to come together here and think together and listen to each other and hear different points of view and learn directly is a great and valuable thing. So thank you very much for doing that.
Can I say just thank you? And I want to say, as I said about the demonstrations here, and then I'm sometimes being asked, okay, what should we do? It's difficult for us to support Israel. And I want to say, support those in Israel that are sharing your values. Continue to support it because it is important also for us. And I think that this is, I mean, liberals of the world unite.
Really, all that remains for me to say is just a couple of quick thank yous. Thank you, James, as always, for handling a tricky topic and a tricky conversation with your usual charm and wit and skill. So thank you very much. Thank you, Tzipi, for flying over especially for this event. If people didn't realise, Channel 4 is just the extra bonus. And for sharing with us your personal views, which means so much to us. I think we heard a rallying cry tonight, which I hope people take away with them. Thank you to our partners, the Jewish News, Choose Democracy, especially New Israel Fund, and our SQR security colleagues, without whom we can't run these kind of events. So thank you guys for that. And just to finish, I said at the very start that JW3 is the home for Jewish culture and conversation. And I hope tonight demonstrated that again, how people from very different backgrounds can come together and have civil discourse and high quality conversation. If you haven't signed up for our mailing list, that is the best way to find out. Nothing bothers me more than when I meet someone and I tell them about an event we just had and they said, why didn't I know about that? As if I can knock on every door in Northwest London Jewry. So please sign up because there's a lot more events we are doing, talks, conversations, classes around Israel and other topics. But we're not the only place you can get that information. Right at the moment, I think it's incumbent upon all of us here to be engaging in these conversations, to be reading the Jewish News, Haaretz, Jerusalem Post, Times of Israel, whatever it is that you read. To listen, if you don't already, to the Unholy podcast, a brilliant weekly podcast that we need as a daily podcast right at the moment. You really need to be listening to it if you want to know what's going on in Israel for brilliant analysis. But please don't stop the conversation now. We're still open for another hour and a half or so. Tzipi's not running away immediately, but we are going to let them go backstage. If you want to stay and carry on the conversations with each other or with trustees or CEOs from many other Jewish organisations that are here, just take your conversation out to our little taste of Israel in the cafe. Grab yourself a falafel, a café afuch, a beer, and carry on the conversations until it's time to leave. And when you do leave, please leave quietly and respect our neighbours. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you.